The blizzard had been raging for 3 days when Lily Harper realized she might die in this God-forsaken cabin, alone and forgotten in the Nebraska wilderness. She pressed her face against the frosted window, watching the white wall of snow that had buried the world outside. The cabin her late father had built as a hunting retreat now felt like a tomb. The wind howled through gaps in the logs, making the lantern flame dance wildly. Her supplies were dwindling. The firewood stack had shrunk to almost nothing. Her horse had broken free from the small stable during the first night of the storm, spooked by thunder that seemed impossible in winter, and vanished into the white abyss. Lily wrapped the wool blanket tighter around her shoulders, her breath visible in the freezing air. She was 22 years old, and this was supposed to be a simple trip. She had traveled from Scottsbluff in November of 1884 to check on the cabin before winter truly set in, to ensure it was secure, to retrieve some of her father's belongings that held sentimental value. He had died 6 months ago, leaving her with the small dress shop in town and this remote property 15 miles northwest, nestled in the pine hills near the North Platte River Valley. The storm had come from nowhere, a furious early winter tempest that the old-timers would talk about for years. Lily had barely made it inside before the snow became impenetrable. Now she was trapped, watching her firewood disappear log by log, knowing that when it ran out, the cold would claim her. She fed another precious piece of wood into the stone fireplace, watching the flames lick at it hungrily. The cabin was small, just one room with a sleeping loft, but even this tiny space was hard to keep warm. The temperature had dropped so low that frost formed on the inside walls. Her fingers ached despite the gloves she wore. Her toes felt numb in her boots. Lily thought about her life in Scottsbluff, about the shop she had inherited, about the quiet existence she had carved out for herself. Her mother had died when she was young, and she had spent her teenage years helping her father with his carpentry business, learning to be independent, learning to survive. He had taught her to shoot, to hunt, to handle herself in the rough country. But he had not taught her how to survive being buried alive in snow with no way out and no one knowing where she was. She had told Mrs. Patterson, her neighbor, that she would be back in 2 days. That had been 5 days ago. The storm had delayed everything. By now, people would be worried, but in this weather, no one could search. The snow was too deep, the visibility too poor, the danger too great. Lily climbed the ladder to the loft and retrieved her father's rifle, checking it again though she had checked it a dozen times already. The weapon was loaded, cleaned, ready. Not that it would help against the cold, but it gave her something to do, some sense of control. She climbed back down and placed it near the door, then sat at the rough wooden table her father had built. The wind screamed louder, and she heard a crack outside, probably a tree branch breaking under the weight of snow. The sound made her jump. Her nerves were frayed from days of isolation and growing fear. She tried to pray, but the words felt empty in the cold air. She tried to sleep, but the cold kept her awake, and when she did doze, she dreamed of freezing, of ice creeping through her veins. On the 4th day of the storm, Lily made an inventory of what remained: 3 pieces of firewood, a handful of coffee beans, some hardtack, a small portion of dried meat, a half-full canteen of water, though she could melt snow if needed. It was not enough. Even if the storm stopped now, she was too weak and too cold to make the 15-mile journey back to Scottsbluff through snow that would be waist-deep or higher. She built up the fire one more time, using 2 of her last 3 logs, determined to get truly warm at least once more. She heated water for coffee, savoring the bitter taste, letting the warmth spread through her body. She ate a piece of hardtack, chewing slowly, trying to make it last. Then she wrapped herself in every blanket and coat she could find and lay down on the rough bed, watching the firelight play across the ceiling. Sleep came fitfully, full of strange dreams. She dreamed of her father, his weathered face smiling at her, telling her to hold on. She dreamed of summer days in Scottsbluff, of the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, of children laughing in the street. She dreamed of things she had never experienced, of a man's arms around her, of feeling truly safe and loved. She woke to darkness. The fire had died to embers. The cold was unbearable, seeping into her bones, making her joints ache. She could barely feel her feet. She knew she should get up, should add the last log to the fire, but she felt so tired, so weak. It would be easy to just lie here, to let the cold take her, to slip away into dreams that were warmer than reality. But something in her, some stubborn core of survival that her father had instilled, made her move. She forced herself to sit up, gasping at the effort, at the pain of cold, stiffened muscles. She stumbled to the fireplace and placed the last log on the embers, blowing on them gently, coaxing the fire back to life. The wood caught, flames rising, and she held her hands out to the warmth, nearly weeping with relief. She knew this was the end. When this log burned down, there would be no more. She had scoured the cabin for anything else to burn, and there was nothing left except the furniture itself, and she was too weak to break apart the heavy table or bed frame. She sat by the fire, feeding it carefully, making it last as long as possible. The wind outside changed pitch, becoming a roar that shook the cabin. Snow hammered against the walls. Lily wondered if the structure would hold or if it would collapse and bury her under timber and snow. She found herself hoping for the collapse, for a quick end rather than the slow freeze that awaited her. Then, through the roar of wind, she heard something else. A sound that did not belong to the storm. A rhythmic thumping, growing louder. At first she thought she was hallucinating, that her mind was creating phantom sounds in its desperation. But the sound continued, steady and purposeful. Something was outside. Lily grabbed the rifle, her heart suddenly pounding. Bears sometimes wandered these hills. Wolves, mountain lions. Any predator would be desperate in this storm, and a cabin would seem like shelter, like prey. She aimed the rifle at the door, her hands shaking from cold and fear and weakness. The sound grew louder, closer. Now she could hear breathing, heavy and labored, and a man's voice, though she could not make out words through the walls and wind. Her finger tensed on the trigger. The door was barred from the inside, a heavy plank across iron brackets, but she saw it shudder as something struck it from outside. "Hello, the cabin," the voice came clear in a momentary lull in the wind. "Anyone inside? I saw smoke," Lily's breath caught. A person. A real person. Hope and suspicion warred inside her. This could be salvation or danger. A lone woman in a remote cabin was vulnerable, and there were men in this territory who would take advantage of that. But she was dying anyway, and at least this was a chance. "Who are you?" she called out, trying to make her voice strong, though it came out as a croak. "Name is Xavier Brennan. Cowboy out of Scottsbluff. I am near frozen out here, miss, and my horse is dying. Please." Lily made a decision. She lowered the rifle and moved to the door, struggling to lift the heavy bar with her weakened arms. It took 3 attempts, and she heard the man outside calling encouragement, telling her to take her time. Finally, the bar came free and she pulled the door open. A blast of snow and wind hit her, nearly knocking her down. A figure stumbled through the doorway, huge and white, covered head to foot in snow. Behind him, she glimpsed the dark shape of a horse, and then the man was inside, and she was throwing her weight against the door to close it, and he added his strength, and together they forced it shut against the wind. Lily stepped back, raising the rifle again with the last of her strength. The man stood bent over, hands on his knees, breathing hard. He was enormous, at least 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat that was frozen stiff with ice. His hat was white with snow, and ice caked his beard. Slowly, he straightened and raised his hands. "I mean you no harm, miss," he said, his voice rough but gentle. "I swear it on my mother's grave. I am just trying not to freeze to death, same as you." Lily studied him through the dim firelight. Even exhausted and frozen, there was something solid and trustworthy about him. His eyes, visible beneath the frost on his eyebrows, were dark and direct, meeting hers without evasion. He was young, maybe 25, with a strong jaw beneath the beard and a face that was weathered by outdoor work but kind in its lines. "My horse," he said. "Please, can I bring her inside? She saved my life getting me here. I cannot leave her to die." Lily glanced at the small cabin, then back at him. It was madness to bring a horse inside, but these were mad times. She nodded, and together they opened the door again. The horse was just outside, a chestnut mare with white markings, trembling violently, covered in snow and ice. The man took her bridle and led her inside, and the horse came willingly, desperate for shelter. The cabin suddenly felt very small with a horse in it, but the animal immediately moved close to the fire, and Lily could not blame her. The man shut the door again and barred it, then began stripping off his frozen outer layers with stiff, clumsy movements. His gloves were frozen to his hands, and Lily set down the rifle and helped him, pulling at the ice-crusted leather until his hands came free. His fingers were white and waxy, the beginning of frostbite. "Here," Lily said, leading him to the fire. "Sit down. You need to warm up slowly, or you will lose those fingers." He obeyed without argument, sinking down in front of the fireplace. She brought her last canteen of water and made him drink, then began working on his boots. They were as frozen as his gloves, and it took several minutes to get them off. His feet were in better shape than his hands, but not by much. She wrapped his hands in a blanket and held them against her body, using her own warmth to bring feeling back slowly, the way her father had taught her. The man gasped at the pain as his hands began to thaw, but he did not pull away. Lily felt the intimacy of the moment. This stranger pressed against her, dependent on her care. She had never been this close to a man who was not her father. She could smell the leather and horse and cold coming off him, could feel the solid strength of his body even in his weakened state. "Thank you," he whispered. "You are saving my life." "You saved mine by coming," Lily replied. "That was my last log on the fire. I was going to freeze tonight." They sat like that for long minutes, the fire crackling, the horse huffing and stamping behind them, the storm raging outside. Gradually, color returned to his hands and he flexed his fingers, testing them. They were red and painful but whole. He would keep them. "Xavier Brennan," he said, looking at her properly for the first time. "I am a wrangler on the Double M Ranch outside Scottsbluff. I was riding fence line when the storm hit, got turned around, lost my bearings. I have been wandering for 2 days, thought I was dead for sure. Then I saw your smoke through the trees." "Lily Harper," she replied. "This is my father's cabin, was my father's cabin. He died last spring." "Lily Harper," Xavier repeated. "You are the seamstress in town, aren't you? Your shop is on 3rd Street, across from the hotel." She nodded, surprised that he knew of her. She had seen cowboys in town, of course, but she had never paid particular attention to any of them. She lived a quiet life, focused on her work, on keeping her father's memory alive through the business he had helped her establish. "I have seen you," Xavier said, a slight smile touching his frost-burned lips. "Everyone knows Miss Harper. The lady who makes the finest dresses in 3 counties, who runs her business with her head up and takes no nonsense from anybody." Lily felt herself blush, a sensation made strange by the cold. "I do my work, that is all." "You do more than that," Xavier said quietly. "You are remarkable." The word hung in the cold air between them, and Lily found she did not know how to respond. She was not used to compliments, especially not from handsome cowboys who had appeared out of blizzards like something from a dime novel. She pulled back, suddenly aware of how close they had been sitting, and busied herself checking his feet, unwrapping the blanket to look at his toes. "They will be fine," she pronounced. "You got lucky. Another hour out there and you would have lost them." "I know," Xavier said seriously. "I was praying with every step, asking God to show me shelter. Then I saw the smoke from your chimney, just a thin trail above the trees. I thought I was seeing things at first, a mirage, but my horse smelled it too, smelled the fire, and she started moving toward it on her own. Animals know." Lily looked at the mare, who stood close to the fireplace, steam rising from her coat as she warmed up. "She is a fine horse. What is her name?" "Copper," Xavier said. "Because of her color. She has been with me 4 years now, through everything. I raised her from a filly, trained her myself." There was love in his voice when he spoke of the horse, and Lily found herself liking him for it. A man who cared for his animals was a man worth knowing, her father always said. She moved to Copper and ran her hands over the mare's legs, checking for injuries. The horse was exhausted and cold, but otherwise sound. "We need more firewood," Lily said, straightforward about their situation. "That log will burn for maybe 3 more hours. Then we have nothing." Xavier looked around the cabin, his expression becoming grim as he assessed their circumstances. "The furniture. Too heavy for me to break up alone, and I have been too weak the last day to manage it. You might have the strength, but it will not burn long. Green wood, sap in it still." "Better than nothing," Xavier said, pushing himself to his feet. He swayed, steadying himself against the wall, then moved to the table. It was solidly built, meant to last, and breaking it apart would be difficult. He studied it for a moment, then went to his saddlebags, which he had dropped inside the door. From them he pulled a hatchet, small but sharp. "I will take it apart piece by piece," he said. "It will give us time." He set to work, and Lily watched the muscles in his back and shoulders move beneath his still damp shirt as he chopped at the table joints. He was methodical and efficient, and within 20 minutes he had reduced the table to a pile of boards and legs. He stacked them near the fireplace, then turned his attention to the single chair. "Your father built this," Xavier said, examining the craftsmanship. "It is fine work." "He was a carpenter," Lily said softly, "the best in Scottsbluff. He built half the buildings in town. I am sorry to have to destroy it. He would understand. Survival comes first. That is what he always said." Xavier nodded and began dismantling the chair. Lily checked his saddlebags and found some jerky, harder and drier than leather, and a small bag of oats meant for his horse. She took some of the oats and mixed them with snow melted in her cooking pot, making a thin gruel. It was not much, but it was food, and that was what mattered. When Xavier finished with the chair, he sat down again, breathing hard from the effort. Lily handed him a tin cup of the gruel, and he ate it without complaint, scraping the bottom of the cup clean. She fed Copper some of the oats, and the horse ate eagerly, then settled down on the floor near the fire, folding her legs beneath her. "She will sleep," Xavier said. "Horses can sense when they are safe. She knows the worst is over." "Is it?" Lily asked. "The storm has not stopped." "But we are together now," Xavier said, meeting her eyes. "You are not alone. That changes everything." The simple words hit Lily harder than she expected. She had been so frightened, so convinced she would die alone in this cabin with no one to know or care. The despair had been worse than the cold, eating at her spirit. But now this man was here, This stranger who looked at her with warm eyes and spoke with quiet confidence, and she felt something shift inside her, some frozen part of her heart beginning to thaw. "Tell me about yourself," Xavier said. "How did you end up here alone?" Lily settled down across from him, feeding another of the table legs into the fire. "I came to check on the cabin before winter. My father left it to me, and I thought I should secure it, make sure it would survive until spring. I only planned to be gone 2 days. The storm caught me, and no one knows you are here. Mrs. Patterson knows I was coming this direction, but not exactly where. The cabin is not marked on any maps. Father liked his privacy when he hunted." Xavier frowned. "So they won't know where to search when the storm clears." "No," Lily admitted. "I am supposed to be at the shop. People will notice I am missing, but they will not know where to look." "Then we need to get you back," Xavier said firmly. "When this blizzard stops, we ride for Scottsbluff together. Copper can carry us both if we go slow." 15 miles, you said. We can make that in a day, even through deep snow." "You would do that?" Lily asked. "Take me back." Xavier looked at her as if she had said something absurd. "Of course I would. Why would I not? You do not know me. I am nothing to you." "You are a woman in need of help," Xavier said simply. "That is all that matters. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I am going back to Scottsbluff myself. The ranch is just beyond town. It would be foolish to go separately." Lily felt foolish for questioning him, but she had learned to be suspicious of men's motives. Living alone, running a business in a rough frontier town, she had encountered her share of men who thought a woman without a husband was easy prey. But there was nothing predatory in Xavier's manner, nothing that set off her instincts for danger. He was simply offering help the way anyone decent would. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I am grateful." "Tell me about your shop," Xavier said, clearly trying to keep conversation going to maintain their spirits. "I have heard the ladies talk about it. They say you can make any design they bring you, that you have a gift for it." Lily found herself talking, describing how she had learned sewing from her mother before she died, how she had practiced for years, making her own clothes and her father's shirts. When her father had earned enough to help her open a shop, she had been terrified, certain she would fail. But the women of Scottsbluff and the surrounding ranches had come, curious at first, then loyal when they saw her work. She could look at a picture in a catalog or a magazine and recreate the design, adjusting it to fit each woman's body perfectly. She used good materials ordered from Omaha and Chicago, and her prices were fair. Within 2 years, the shop was thriving. "And you run it alone?" Xavier asked. "I have a girl who helps sometimes, Jenny Martin, but mostly, yes, it is just me. I like the independence. I like knowing that I can support myself, that I do not need to depend on anyone." "Your father raised you well," Xavier observed. "He raised me to survive," Lily agreed. "Though I have not done a very good job of that this week." "You are alive," Xavier pointed out. "That is the only measure that matters. You lasted until help came. That is survival." They talked through the night, feeding the disassembled furniture piece by piece into the fire, rationing it carefully. Xavier told her about growing up on a small ranch in Kansas, the youngest of 5 brothers. His father had died when he was 16, and his mother had struggled to keep the ranch going. Eventually, she had sold it and moved in with Xavier's oldest brother. Xavier had drifted north, working cattle drives, learning the cowboy trade. He had been with the Double M Ranch for 2 years now, saving his money, hoping someday to have his own spread. "You like the work?" Lily asked. "I love it," Xavier said without hesitation. "Being outside, working with horses and cattle, seeing the land change with the seasons. It is hard and the pay is not much, but it is honest work and I am good at it. That matters to me, being good at what I do." "I understand that," Lily said. I feel the same way about my sewing. We are alike then, Xavier said, and something in the way he said it made Lily's heart beat faster. The wind began to ease as dawn approached, though they could not see the sun through the heavy clouds and falling snow. Xavier dozed sitting up, and Lily found herself watching him, studying the lines of his face in the firelight. He was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw and high cheekbones. His hands, now recovered from the frostbite, were large and capable, calloused from work. There was something deeply reassuring about his presence, a sense of steadiness and strength. She realized she felt safe with him, safer than she had felt in a long time. Not just physically safe, though that was part of it, but emotionally safe. He listened when she talked, really listened, asking questions that showed he cared about her answers. He treated her with respect, as an equal, not as some fragile thing to be protected or manipulated. It was refreshing and unsettling at the same time. Xavier woke with the instinct of a man used to keeping watch and immediately checked the fire, adding more wood. They were getting low on their makeshift fuel supply, but the storm was definitely weakening. By mid-morning, the wind had dropped to a whisper, and the snow had thinned to scattered flakes. "We should try to leave today," Xavier said, peering out the window. "The snow is deep, but Copper can manage. If we wait, another storm might come and we will be in the same situation with no wood left at all." Lily knew he was right. She gathered her few belongings, packing them in a canvas bag. Xavier saddled Copper, moving with practiced efficiency despite the cramped quarters. The horse stood patiently, seeming to understand that work was required. They extinguished the fire, a painful decision but necessary to prevent any danger of the cabin burning down. Xavier helped Lily into her coat, his hands gentle as he tied her scarf more securely around her face. Then he opened the door, and they stepped out into a transformed world. The snow was over 3 feet deep, smooth and pristine, covering everything. The trees were weighted down, branches hanging low. The sky was still gray but lighter, with hints of breaks in the clouds. The cold was intense, sharp and clean, but without the murderous wind it was bearable. Xavier mounted Copper first, then reached down and pulled Lily up behind him in one smooth motion. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solidity of him, the warmth even through his thick coat. Copper snorted and began walking, breaking trail through the snow with difficulty but determination. The journey was slow and exhausting. The mare struggled through the drifts, sometimes sinking almost to her chest. Xavier guided her carefully, choosing the path of least resistance, using the shelter of trees where he could. Lily clung to him, her face pressed against his back to protect it from the cold. She could feel the rhythm of his breathing, the steady beat of his heart. They stopped twice to rest the horse, and during the second stop, Xavier turned to Lily and said, "How are you holding up?" "I am fine," Lily said. Though she was shivering despite being pressed against him, Xavier frowned and dismounted, then pulled her down. He opened his coat and drew her inside it, wrapping the heavy leather around both of them, holding her against his chest. The warmth was immediate and overwhelming. Lily gasped, realizing how cold she had actually been. "Better?" Xavier asked, his breath warm against her hair. "Yes," Lily whispered. She could feel the entire length of his body against hers, the strength of his arms around her. It was the most intimate thing she had ever experienced, and she felt her face flush with something that was not cold. She tilted her head back and found him looking down at her, his dark eyes serious and warm at the same time. "Lily," he said softly, and then he bent his head and kissed her. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than a demand. Lily's first instinct was to pull back to protect herself, but something stopped her. Instead, She leaned into the kiss, her cold lips warming against his, her hands clutching the front of his shirt beneath the coat. The world seemed to narrow to this moment, this connection, this sudden, overwhelming feeling that she had been waiting for this without knowing it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier looked almost shocked. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have done that. I took advantage." "No," Lily said quickly. "You did not. I wanted you to. You did." "Yes," Lily said, feeling brave and terrified at the same time. "I have never felt like this before, Xavier. I do not understand it. You are a stranger, but you do not feel like one." "I know," Xavier said, relief flooding his face. "I feel the same way. From the moment I saw you in that cabin, I felt like I knew you, like I had been looking for you without realizing it." They stood like that, wrapped in his coat, Copper patient beside them, and Lily felt her heart open in a way it never had before. She had always been so careful, so guarded, focused on her independence and her business. She had never let herself think about love, about marriage, about sharing her life with someone. But now, holding this man who had appeared out of the blizzard and said the words she needed most to hear, "You are not alone," she felt all her defenses crumbling. "We should keep going," Xavier said reluctantly. "We need to get you warm and fed, somewhere safe." They remounted, and this time when Lily wrapped her arms around him, it felt different, more like an embrace than simply holding on. Xavier reached down and squeezed her hand where it rested on his stomach, a wordless communication that sent warmth through her entire body. The miles passed slowly, but finally, as the weak winter sun was beginning to set, they saw the shapes of buildings through the trees. Scott's Bluff, small and tough on the edge of the wilderness, a collection of wooden structures clustered around a main street. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Lily nearly wept at the sight of civilization. Xavier guided Copper down the main street, and people came out of their homes and shops, staring. Mrs. Patterson ran up, her face a mixture of relief and worry. "Lily Harper, we thought you were dead," she cried. "Where have you been?" "Trapped in the cabin," Lily said, her voice hoarse from the cold and the long silence. "The storm caught me. Xavier found me. He saved my life." News spread quickly, as it always did in small towns. Within an hour, half of Scottsbluff knew that Miss Harper had been trapped in the blizzard and rescued by Xavier Brennan from the Double M. The story took on mythic proportions in the telling, the way stories do, but the core truth remained. He had found her, he had kept her alive, he had brought her home. The doctor checked them both and declared them healthy, though he ordered rest and warm food. Mrs. Patterson insisted Lily stay with her that night, fussing over her like a mother hen. Xavier was surrounded by ranchers and cowboys wanting to hear the story, and Lily watched him from across the room in the hotel where everyone had gathered, seeing how patiently he answered questions, how he downplayed his own role. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Xavier smiled at her, a private smile that was just for her, and Lily felt her heart skip. Over the next weeks, as Scottsbluff recovered from the blizzard and life returned to normal, Lily found herself thinking about Xavier constantly. He came to her shop 3 days after their return, his hat in his hands, looking uncertain for the first time since she had known him. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "Make sure you were recovering well." "I am fine," Lily said, setting down the dress she was hemming. "Thanks to you." "I was wondering," Xavier said, his confidence returning, "if you might like to have dinner with me at the hotel restaurant tomorrow evening if you are free." Lily felt her heart race. She had never gone to dinner with a man before, never courted, never allowed herself that vulnerability. But she found herself nodding, saying yes, feeling a smile spread across her face. "Tomorrow evening, then," Xavier said, and his answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. The dinner was the first of many. Xavier came to town whenever he could get time away from the ranch, which was not as often as either of them would have liked, but they made the most of every moment. They walked together through Scottsbluff, talked for hours in her shop after she closed, had dinners where they lost track of time. Lily learned more about his dreams, his hopes for the future. Xavier learned about her love of beautiful things, her pride in her work, her fierce independence. "I do not want to give up my shop," Lily said one evening as they walked along the edge of town, watching the sunset. "Even if I marry someday, I want to keep working. Is that wrong?" "Why would it be wrong?" Xavier asked, genuinely puzzled. "Most men want their wives at home taking care of the house." "Most men are fools," Xavier said bluntly. "You have a gift, Lily, and a business you built yourself. That is something to be proud of, not something to give up. Any man who truly loves you would support that, not try to take it away." Lily stopped walking and turned to look at him. "Do you love me, Xavier?" He did not hesitate. "Yes. I have loved you since that night in the cabin when you wrapped my frozen hands in your blanket and held them against your heart to warm them. I have loved you every moment since then. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a couple of months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life." "I love you too," Lily whispered, and saying the words out loud felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Xavier pulled her into his arms right there on the street, not caring who might see, and kissed her with all the passion and tenderness he had been holding back. Lily melted into him, feeling safe and cherished and alive in a way she never had before. They were married in the spring of 1885, in the small church in Scottsbluff, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Lily wore a dress she had made herself, white silk with lace she had ordered special from Chicago, and Xavier wore a new suit that made him look almost uncomfortable until he saw her coming down the aisle, and then his face transformed with such joy that she nearly stumbled. "You are beautiful," he whispered when she reached his side, and she believed him. The ranch foreman had given Xavier a small piece of land as a wedding present, 5 acres on the edge of the Double M property, with permission to build a house. Xavier worked on it every spare moment, and by summer they had a home. It was small, just 4 rooms, but it was theirs. Lily kept her shop in town, riding in 3 days a week to work, and Xavier continued his work as a cowboy, but they built a life together that balanced both their needs. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, learning to live together, to share space and decisions and dreams. They had arguments, times when Lily's independence clashed with Xavier's protective instincts, or when Xavier's long hours at the ranch left Lily feeling alone. But they learned to talk through problems, to compromise, to remember why they had fallen in love in the first place. On the anniversary of the blizzard, they rode out to the cabin together. It stood silent and empty, but Lily no longer saw it as the place where she nearly died. Instead, she saw it as the place where she met Xavier, where her real life began. "You broke through that door and said I was not alone," Lily remembered, standing in the empty cabin with Xavier's arm around her. "That was the moment everything changed." "I meant it," Xavier said. "You will never be alone again, Lily. I promise you that." In the fall of 1886, Lily realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had never thought much about children, had been so focused on her business and her independence. But the idea of a child with Xavier, a living symbol of their love, felt right in a way she had not expected. "Are you happy?" she asked him when she told him, uncertain of his reaction. Xavier picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "Happy, Lily, I am beyond happy. We are going to be parents. We are going to have a family." Their son was born in the summer of 1887, a healthy boy with Xavier's dark eyes and Lily's stubborn chin. They named him Thomas, after Lily's father, and from the moment Xavier held him, Lily knew that her husband would be a wonderful father. He was patient and gentle with the baby, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Thomas at night when he cried so Lily could rest. Lily cut back her hours at the shop but did not give it up entirely. Mrs. Patterson's niece, a skilled seamstress in her own right, became her partner, managing the shop on the days Lily stayed home with Thomas. It was not a perfect arrangement, but it worked, allowing Lily to keep her hand in the business she loved while also being present for her son. Xavier continued to save money, and in 1888 he was able to buy his own small herd of cattle. The foreman of the Double M, impressed by Xavier's work ethic and skill, sold him 50 head at a fair price and gave him grazing rights on part of the ranch land. It was the beginning of Xavier's dream of having his own ranch. "We will call it the Brennan Ranch," Xavier said, watching his cattle graze. "And someday we will pass it on to Thomas and he will pass it on to his children." "You are building something that will last," Lily said, pride swelling in her chest. "We are building it," Xavier corrected. "Everything I do for you and Thomas. This is our legacy." In 1889, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less frightened, more confident in her ability to be a mother. Their daughter was born in early 1890, a tiny, perfect girl with red gold hair that neither parent could account for. "She must get it from some distant relative," Lily said, laughing as she nursed the baby. "She is beautiful," Xavier said, touching the baby's soft hair with one calloused finger. "What should we name her, Rose?" Lily said. "For something beautiful and strong." Rose Brennan proved to be both those things as she grew. She was fearless where Thomas was cautious, loud where he was quiet. The two children were different in every way, but they adored each other, and Xavier and Lily loved watching them grow. The years passed in a blur of work and joy and occasional hardship. There were droughts that killed part of the herd, winters that were brutally hard, a fire that destroyed half the barn Xavier had built. But they persevered, supporting each other, building their dream piece by piece. By 1895, the Brennan Ranch was a reality. Xavier had bought the 5 acres he had been building on, plus another 100 acres of grazing land. His herd had grown to over 200 head. He hired 2 cowboys to help with the work, and Lily found herself not just a rancher's wife but a true partner in the business, helping with books and planning. Her shop in Scottsbluff continued to thrive under Mrs. Patterson's niece's management, and Lily still took special commissions, creating elaborate dresses for weddings and important occasions. She had found a balance that satisfied both sides of her nature, the independent businesswoman and the devoted wife and mother. Thomas, at 8 years old, was already showing an interest in ranching, following his father everywhere, asking endless questions about cattle and horses and land. Rose, at 5, was a whirlwind of energy, equally comfortable in her mother's sewing room or out in the fields with her father. Lily and Xavier often looked at each other over their children's heads and smiled, amazed at what they had created together. On a winter evening in 1896, 12 years after the blizzard that had brought them together, Lily and Xavier sat in front of their fireplace, watching the flames dance. The children were asleep upstairs. Outside, snow was falling, gentle this time, a reminder rather than a threat. "You ever think about that night?" Lily asked, her head resting on Xavier's shoulder. "All the time," Xavier said. "I think about how easily I could have missed you, could have gone a different direction, could have given up and frozen to death a mile away from your cabin. I think about all the tiny choices that had to happen exactly right for me to find you." "It was meant to be," Lily said with conviction. Yes, Xavier agreed. I believe that. We were meant to find each other to build this life together. Are you happy? Lily asked, the same question she had asked when she told him about her first pregnancy, but with different weight now, encompassing their entire life together. Xavier turned to look at her, his dark eyes soft in the firelight. Lily, I am happier than I ever imagined I could be. You gave me everything I ever wanted and so much I did not even know to hope for. A home, a family, a partner who challenges me and supports me. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I loved you desperately then. I love you too, Lily said, tears in her eyes. You broke through that door and told me I was not alone, and you have kept that promise every single day since. I am never alone because I have you. They kissed in the firelight, and it was sweet and familiar and still electric after all these years. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, they were warm and safe and together, exactly as they were meant to be. In 1898, Xavier was able to purchase another 300 acres adjacent to their property when the owner retired and moved back east. The Brennan Ranch was becoming a significant operation, respected throughout the region. Thomas, at 11, was already a skilled rider and took on real responsibilities around the ranch. Rose, at 8, had discovered she had her mother's eye for beauty and spent hours sketching the landscape and the animals. Lily's shop had expanded as well. Mrs. Patterson's niece had gotten married and moved away, and Lily had taken on 2 new seamstresses, turning the shop into a true business that employed several women. She was proud of providing good work to women who needed it, giving them the same independence she valued so much. As the new century approached, Lily and Xavier often talked about how much the world was changing. Railroads were expanding, connecting the small town of Scottsbluff to larger cities. New inventions were appearing, making life easier in some ways, more complicated in others. But through all the changes, their love remained constant, the foundation on which everything else was built. In 1900, Thomas announced at 16 that he wanted to go to the agricultural college in Lincoln to learn modern ranching techniques. Xavier was initially resistant, wanting his son by his side, but Lily convinced him that education would only make Thomas a better rancher in the long run. They sent him off with pride and a little sadness, watching their boy become a man. Rose, at 13, was becoming a talented artist. She had filled sketchbooks with drawings of ranch life, and a traveling art teacher who passed through Scottsbluff declared she had real talent. Lily and Xavier encouraged her, though they were not sure what a career in art would look like for a ranch girl in Nebraska. She will find her way, Lily said confidently, just like we did. In 1903, Lily and Xavier celebrated their 18th anniversary. The small church wedding seemed a lifetime ago, though the love they had felt then was still alive and growing. They threw a party at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors, and Lily looked around at the full house, the laughter, the life they had created, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Xavier found her standing on the porch, looking out at the sunset, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Brennan. I was just thinking about how lucky I am," Lily said, leaning back against him. "How different my life could have been if that blizzard had not trapped me, if you had not found me." "It was not luck," Xavier said. "It was fate. We were always meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. I am certain of that." "So am I," Lily agreed. She turned in his arms to face him, seeing the gray in his hair now, the deeper lines around his eyes, all the marks of time and work and life. She knew she had changed too, was no longer the young seamstress who had nearly frozen in a cabin. She was a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, a rancher. She had become more than she ever imagined she could be, and it was because of the man who held her. "I love you, Xavier Brennan," she said. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left." "And I love you, Lily Brennan," he replied. "My beautiful, strong, amazing wife. You are still the best thing that ever happened to me." They kissed as the sun set, painting the Nebraska sky in shades of gold and red, and behind them, through the open door of their home, they could hear their children laughing, their friends talking, the sounds of a life well lived and well loved. Thomas returned from college in 1904, full of new ideas about breeding and land management. He and Xavier worked side by side, combining the old ways with new knowledge, and the ranch flourished. Rose had won a prize for her artwork in a regional competition and was talking about going to art school in Chicago, though Xavier was deeply uncomfortable with the idea of his daughter so far away in a big city. "She has to follow her dreams," Lily reminded him gently, "the way we followed ours." "But Chicago," Xavier protested, "it is so far and she is just a girl." "She is 18, Lily said firmly. "A woman, and she is smart and talented. We have to trust that we raised her well enough to handle herself." Xavier grumbled but eventually agreed, and in the fall of 1905, they put Rose on a train to Chicago, where she would study at an art academy. Lily cried on the platform, and Xavier held her, both of them watching until the train disappeared from sight. "Our children are grown," Xavier said quietly. "When did that happen?" "While we were busy building everything else," Lily said, wiping her eyes. "But we did well, Xavier. Look at them. Thomas is a fine man, a skilled rancher. Rose is pursuing her passion. We gave them the foundation to build their own lives." "The way that Blizzard gave us our foundation," Xavier said. "Exactly," Lily agreed. In 1906, Thomas married a girl from a neighboring ranch, Emma Sullivan, a practical, kind young woman who loved ranch life as much as he did. They had a wedding at the Brennan Ranch, and Lily made Emma's dress, putting all her skill into creating something beautiful for her son's bride. Xavier walked Emma down the aisle alongside her father, and when he gave her hand to Thomas, Lily saw tears in her husband's eyes. The young couple built a house on the far end of the ranch property, and Thomas took on more responsibility for the daily operations. Xavier, now in his 40s, was happy to step back slightly, though he still worked hard every day. He and Thomas made decisions together, and it was clear that the ranch would be in good hands when Xavier eventually retired. Rose came home from Chicago for the wedding, transformed by her time in the city. She was more confident, more sophisticated, full of stories about galleries and artists and the exciting world she was discovering. But she was still their Rose, still the girl who could sketch a perfect likeness of her father's favorite horse in minutes, still the daughter who hugged them both fiercely and said she missed the ranch. In 1908, Thomas and Emma had their first child, a boy they named Xavier Jr. Lily held her first grandchild and felt her heart expand in a new way. She and Xavier were not just husband and wife, not just parents, but now grandparents starting a new chapter. "We are getting old," Xavier joked, though he was clearly delighted with his namesake. "We are getting richer," Lily corrected. "Rich in all the ways that matter." Rose married in 1909, a fellow artist she had met in Chicago named Robert Mitchell. The wedding was in Chicago, and Lily and Xavier made the long train journey to attend. It was Lily's first time in a big city, and she found it overwhelming and exciting in equal measure. But she was grateful to return to Nebraska, to the wide skies and open spaces that had become home. By 1910, the Brennan Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. Xavier had achieved his dream and then surpassed it. Lily's shop continued to operate, though she had stepped back from daily management, visiting only once a week to check on things and take special orders. They had built something lasting, something they could be proud of. On a winter night in 1910, 26 years after the blizzard that had brought them together, Lily and Xavier sat in front of their fireplace, just as they had so many times before. It was snowing outside, a gentle snow that reminded them of that fateful night without threatening them. "Do you remember what you said to me when you first came through that door?" Lily asked. "I said a lot of things," Xavier replied with a smile. "I was half frozen and babbling." "You said I was not alone," Lily reminded him. "Those were the words I needed most to hear at that moment." "And you have not been alone since," Xavier said. "Nor have I. We have built a life together, Lily, something real and lasting. We have children and grandchildren. We have a ranch that will continue for generations. We have a love that has only grown stronger with time." "I know I do not say it often enough," Lily said, taking his hand, "but thank you. Thank you for finding me that night. Thank you for choosing me every day since. Thank you for being the man who kept his promise." "I should be thanking you," Xavier said. "You took a half-frozen cowboy into your cabin and trusted him with your life. You married me when you could have had your pick of men in Scottsbluff. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose beyond just existing. You made me into the man I am." "We made each other," Lily said softly. "That is what love does. It does not complete us because we were already complete. It makes us better, makes us more than we could be alone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire, holding hands the way they had that first night in the cabin. Outside, the snow fell gently on the Brennan Ranch, covering everything in white, peaceful and beautiful. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds continued to build their life together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, with love as their foundation and each other as their home. In 1912, Thomas and Emma had their second child, a daughter named Lily after her grandmother. Rose and Robert had their first child in Chicago, a son they named William. Xavier and Lily traveled to Chicago to meet him, and Lily held both her grandchildren, one in each arm, and felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. "This is what it was all for," she told Xavier on the train ride home. "All the work, all the struggle, all the years. It was to create this family, this legacy." "And it is a good legacy," Xavier said with satisfaction. "The Brennan name will continue, and everyone who bears it will know they come from strong stock, from people who loved each other and built something worth having." As they entered their 50s, both Xavier and Lily began to slow down, not from illness but simply from the natural pace of aging. Xavier let Thomas handle more of the ranch operations, stepping into an advisory role. Lily closed her shop in town, satisfied that she had given employment to several generations of seamstresses and created beautiful things for countless women. She kept a sewing room at the ranch and still made clothes for her grandchildren and special occasions, but the pressure of running a business was gone. They spent more time together, Xavier and Lily, riding out to check on the cattle, sitting on their porch in the evenings, traveling occasionally to visit Rose in Chicago or explore other parts of the country they had never seen. They had worked hard for decades, and now they allowed themselves to simply enjoy the fruits of that work. In 1915, on their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration at the ranch. The house was full of noise and laughter and life. Thomas gave a toast, speaking about how his parents had shown him what real love looked like, how they had built something from nothing through hard work and dedication. Rose read a poem she had written about the blizzard that brought them together, about fate and love and the strength of two people who refused to give up. Lily cried happy tears, and Xavier held her hand under the table, squeezing it the way he had 1,000 times before. A silent communication that said, "I am here. You are not alone, I love you." That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Lily and Xavier walked out to look at the stars. The Nebraska sky was clear and vast, scattered with more stars than seemed possible. They had stood in this same spot countless times over the years, watching the seasons change, the ranch grow, their children grow up. 30 years, Lily said, marveling at it. It has gone so fast. And yet every day was full, Xavier said. We did not waste our time together, Lily. We lived fully, loved fully. I would do it all again, Lily said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you every single time. And I would ride through that blizzard again, Xavier said, through 1,000 blizzards if it meant finding you at the end. They kissed under the stars, and it was tender and sweet, filled with 3 decades of love and partnership and shared life. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come on," Xavier said. "Let's go inside. It is cold out here and I do not want you catching a chill." "Always protecting me," Lily said fondly. "Always," Xavier agreed. "That is what I promised when I said you were not alone, and I will keep that promise until my last breath." They walked back to the house hand in hand, their footsteps crunching in the light snow that had begun to fall. Behind them, the ranch stood solid and strong, a testament to what 2 people could build when they loved each other and worked together. Ahead of them, the house glowed with warm light, full of memories and life and the promise of more years to come. Lily and Xavier Brennan had found each other in the midst of a blizzard, in a moment of desperate need and unlikely rescue. They had built a life that surpassed anything either could have imagined alone. They had raised children who were good and strong, had created a legacy that would continue for generations, had loved each other through every season and every challenge. As they stepped into their warm house and closed the door against the winter night, both knew with absolute certainty that they were blessed. They had found their home not just in a place but in each other, and that home would endure long after they were gone, in the children and grandchildren who carried their love forward, in the ranch that bore their name, in the story of a cowboy who broke through a door in a blizzard and said to a frightened woman, "You are not alone." And she never was again.